The idea guy. We've got the developer who's shipped multiple games. He's respected, battle-tested, knows the pain of finishing. We have the guy who works 9 to 5 in the industry. He's professional, structured, understands scope and deadlines. And we have the big brain guy who has an idea. Oh no, he's the visionary, the disruptor, the man with the greatest game idea ever, who's never shipped or done anything. This video is not just for roasting idea guys, though we will do some of that. This video is for the idea guy who wants to earn respect from developers and the indie dev with big ideas but unfinished games. We've all done it, starting 5 different projects, finishing none, struggling with expanding scope, have awesome ideas but just can't execute. This video is ultimately about turning ideas into finished, playable, and shipped products. We'll get to that in the back half of the video about process improvement and what you can do to ship your games. But first, let's have some fun and roast some idea guys on social media. I classify the idea guys into 3 distinct categories, and we'll start with the creative tornado. So here's an example. So I've got an idea and the plot. The idea is still brainstorming, but I have an idea what the game's going to be about. Without going into detail, because, of course they don't want anyone to steal their great idea, it's a game where you meet a bunch of different characters and travel to different parts of the world. Okay, so like any game ever. They're in the same map, but they're depicted as different countries. It's like Red Dead 2, but also not. You're going to travel to towns and talk to different people and ask questions and maybe do missions or favors for people to progress. So once again, like any RPG ever. So I want to do something that's part visual novel and part open world. Even try to wrap your brain around that. The indies is going to be graphic and the art style is going to be limited, but I don't want pixels, but it's got to be in the same vein as Catherine or Persona. So we've got this general idea about an RPG and a guy who walks around and does missions, and we've got conflicting art styles, and okay, so where are we going with this? The creature picture taking part will probably be in 2D, but fishing games, like open world games, but it's a mini game, but it's also 3D, and it's going to be 2000s-esque. So, here's this person with some idea about this game that they think is, groundbreaking, and they're reaching out to the developers to try to get, some developers on board with coming on their idea, but they're still in the brainstorming phase. Usually when you contact these people, this is about all they have. So they're like, hey, the game design's all done. But you ask them, hey, you have the game design document? And they're like, oh no, it's just in my head. And they can't give you any more details than what they've already shared on their Facebook posts. So typically interacting with a creative tornado idea guy goes something like this. So it'll be Monday night and they hit you up. They're like, yo, this game-changing feature, let's get it now. I want to get a demo by tomorrow morning. So as a developer, we do what we do, get a whole bunch of coffee and pull an all-nighter and get that feature done and ship that demo out to the idea guy the next morning. But you know what? The idea guy had some coffee, he had a shower, and you just wouldn't understand his vision. But we've got to scrap that whole feature and do this instead. Go ahead and get working. Here's another really good one that I saw on social media. So this guy's reaching out to, again, developers on an indie dev group, and he's like, I have an idea for an idea, but I need to know which idea would work best for my ideas. And here, I think this comment sums it up the best. This is the dumbest effing post I've seen in a while. And reading this comment and what they followed up with underneath the comments, they were absolutely serious. This was not a sarcastic post. So that's essentially the creative tornado. And the real world example of the creative tornado is, of course, our best friend, Todd. 16 times the detail. We all know the quote. Moving on, we've got the philosopher. So this is the kind of guy who thinks that having the idea is the most difficult, or at least a substantive part of the game development process. I mean, they have the idea, right? You just got to go and type on your keyboard a little bit and suddenly you have the game. Did they do any market research to make sure their idea is viable? Of course not. They thought of it. It's the best idea ever. Everyone's gonna love it. They designed the game, and once again, hey, where's the design document? Oh, no, of course, it's all in my head. I'll just sit beside you while you're typing away on your keyboard, and I'll tell you exactly what I want done, right? So here's a real-world example. So this person reaching out, hey, I'm not a developer, but I have the ideas, the gameplay, and art covered. It's just the programming side we need. Easy peasy, right? So, coming out here with a little bit of a crazy ask, he wants to develop actual physical hardware for this device that's a couple decades old at this point. Wow, I'm really dating myself. I grew up with the Game Boy Advance. And again, we're talking revenue share here. And this sums it up, in exchange for what? Money? Beer? A hug? No. The answer is revenue share, of course. We don't have any funding. But wait, what we do have is an idea. Here's another question. This is the kind of person who maybe has this great idea, but they don't have any real concept of how long game development and this sort of things take. So they're reaching out. They say, hey, I have no modeling or animation experience, but I just want to hop into Blender and make a trailer that's super cool like Witcher 3. Like, how long would this take me? Like, I could probably get it done next weekend, right? And here the comment sums it up. Without skills, it will essentially take forever. Even especially like as a solo person, doing anything of this scale would take quite literally a decade, especially if you're starting from the point where you don't have any experience. It might take you a decade of all of your free time working on Blender and animation to even get to the point where you could then contribute successfully or importantly to a project like the Witcher 3 trailer. So just these people with completely unrealistic expectations of what is done in the industry. And like he says here, a lot of people, including myself, end up learning that the hard way. Moving on. We have the third type of idea guy here. I like to call the visionary. So they have an idea and I want it to exist right now. Typically they have a little tiny bit of experience in programming in the industry. So they think they know more than they think they know. I think that's, the Dunning-Kruger effect. But here's this person's issue. They only know Python and their device can't handle game engines. So they have a computer that can't even run Godot. I mean, come on. Like, my PC with a GT 1030 is running Godot. It has no problems. I'm, working on a 3D game as we speak. I tried making a game on Python. I just want your thoughts about it. My limited Python experience it's painful, and I've been having a harder time than doing it in Python than creating a game engine. I have to manually add tools for my game, and come on, that's just a joke here. The follow-up. Here, another post. I'm just a beginner. I want to learn more about game making. I saw lots of posts in this group about the idea guy. And here, what are the common red flags? And here's the most common red flag is they want people to make their game for free. And they think that doing game design or writing the story makes them a contributor. So the fact is that game design or writing the story does indeed make you a contributor. But often what happens is these idea guys say they have the game designed and say they have the story created. But when you actually reach out to them, they don't have any dialogue. It's basically just a chicken scratch on a McDonald's napkin of like, hey, like I want this to happen, I want this to happen, and I want this to happen. Like, it's like they spend a couple hours like chatting with their bros over a few beers, and they think they've, designed this entire game. So they don't have any concept of actually what game design is. They just think it's like having an idea, essentially. So at this point in the video, we're going to take a little bit of a shift. So this is where we get into the real world expectations. And so at the start of the video, I mentioned, this video is for idea guys who want to earn respect from the developers, but also indie developers who are having issues with themselves, sort of falling into these bad practices of idea guys. So let's take a little bit of a contrasting comparison here between an idea guy and someone like a project leader or a producer or a project manager, a PM. So on the left-hand side, we have here the idea guy is chasing the perfect vision, and a project manager manages the scope. The idea guy is expanding the scope endlessly, whereas at least the project manager is breaking work down into deliverable chunks. So let's take a moment here and just talk about this. So I'm not saying that, chasing the perfect vision is necessarily a bad thing, but when it comes to shipping product, being a perfectionist is sort of an issue. Even quote unquote the best games of the year are still released with bugs. Like, there's still bugs in them. So if you're constantly chasing that perfect vision, or pixel perfecting every single animation, every single sprite, every single model, then you're never going to end up to the point where you have something that's deliverable. So what's important here is the MVP. It's known as a minimal viable product in the industry. So a project manager values shipping this minimal viable product over the dream. And this might kind of get a bad rap nowadays because we're getting a lot of unfinished games. But what I mean by shipping the minimal viable product is shipping the minimal viable product to at least your alpha internal testers or your beta testers, or like your Kickstart backers. Like, let's get them something of value as fast as possible so that we can start iterating on feedback. Idea guys make decisions reactively, and project managers make decisions based on data, feedback, and market realities. So we have to put our biases aside when we're idea guys and understand that just because we have an idea, maybe we've been attached to it since we were a kid. We've had this dream of having this game, but we have to realize that basically anyone who's ever played a video game ever probably has a couple ideas for their own video games. I made a video on this earlier, and I'll link to it in the description. Very easy method for making new ideas, and it's sort of on the same idea guy topic that, ideas are essentially have no value until you've got some sort of minimal viable product going. Most importantly here, market realities and feedback. So if you want to transition your production pipeline to iterating on player feedback, this is super important. So you can't get that player feedback unless you have a minimal viable product to actually ship to your customers. At the end of the day, you may like the game, your homie might like the game, and the dev sitting beside you might like the game, but if your players don't, you're not going to be selling any copies. So the main difference here is that the idea guy chases fantasy and dreams, whereas the project manager is managing reality. So here's a little bit of an idea. So of what the types of questions and things you might find yourself asking if you're in like a leader position and you're doing a good job, or if you're an idea guy. So a project leader is going to ask, what is the smallest playable version of this idea? And I don't mean make some tiny crappy unfinished game and ship that. I just mean let's work on getting that minimal viable product and shipping it to our core user base and then iterating on that feedback. What delivers value right now? And then when it comes to taking a step down, not delivering the whole game to our testers, but what feature can we ship in 2 to 4 weeks, not 2 to 4 years? Let's not focus on this 100-world MMO multiplayer experience with VR and AR support that's also on mobile. Let's just focus on, getting that new class added and ensuring that when he casts a spell, like, it looks dope. Like, what feature can we ship in 2 to 4 weeks? Let's break that down into workable chunks. By next Wednesday, I'm going to have this done. By the following Wednesday, we're going to have the demo of this new class. And additionally here, what should we cut, not add? And again, this might get some bad rap, especially with what's going on in the industry, especially in the AAA industry. But it's a reality of project management and project development and indie dev as well. You might have this great idea, but really at the end of the day, if you want to ship something, you kind of need to ask yourself the hard questions. What is the core gameplay loop? What is core to the game that we're trying to make here? And if we can cut all of that fluff and shave 2 years off of the project development, well, let's go ahead and do that. Of course, here the quote, shipping beats dreaming every single time. So, a few other ideas here, kind of piggybacking off of some of the social media posts. I want the art style to be like visual novel, but not too pixelated, but 2D and 3D features, but it's got to be super unique. It's also going to be super high poly and resolution, but I still want it to run on weak machines. Just completely ridiculous, absurd statements like this. And again, here, having 18 different classes and 100 different visible worlds, all with enterable buildings, before we even reveal it to the market and get any feedback. And, what often happens with things like this is 99% of the time, you never actually get it to that point, so you never ship or reveal to the market anything. And at 1% of games that, have this crazy huge feature set, and then they reveal it to the market, and well, at the end of the day, it's not what the players want, and their project dies at the end of the day anyways. And stuff like, I thought of this last night, it needs to be included. So let's transition here in how to improve your own strategy. So if you're an indie dev working on your own game, the core concept here is that you're wearing multiple hats. So when you're down at your computer developing a feature, you're the developer. When you're done that feature, you're the tester. When you're working on your YouTube videos, you're the marketer. When you're working on your game design and scope creep, you're the project manager. So you're taking off all of these hats. And so these are some process strategy improvements to help you actually end up shipping games. So we'll go over these 5 topics here more in depth. Learning, scope discipline, thinking in deliverables, respecting the cost of implementation, replacing ego, and becoming a builder of momentum. So learning scope discipline here, we want to focus on what is the core gameplay loop. If you watched my How to Develop a Game from Scratch with No Experience series, this is one of the core concepts, starting with the core gameplay loop. First off, it's more fun to start developing the core gameplay loop than the main menu screen. Let's be completely honest. No one wants to connect buttons to the back end. At the end of the day, it's something that just needs to be done. But if you just hop into that core gameplay loop and, get your character running around, getting him slashing his sword, that's a lot more fun and starts building that momentum. And this is also the quickest path to player market feedback. You could theoretically have your group of internal testers just hop right into the core gameplay loop. Like, if you're developing a game like Skyrim, just get the combat working. We don't need to start with that entrance scene with the horse and the carriage and all of that. Just ship a product to your internal testers, get them to sit down at your computer with your pre-alpha build and just ask them, hey, is this fun? This is where the game's going. This is what the players are going to be doing 90% of the time when they're playing the game. They're only in that intro scene for 0.001% of their gameplay time. So let's get that core gameplay working. Let's iterate on that feedback and make sure that the actual game is fun. And get feedback on that before we, start building in all the bells and whistles that really round out the whole experience. So scope discipline, what can be removed without breaking the experience? Questions like this to the idea guy. Does it really need VR support? Why don't we just ship with 5 playable classes instead of 10? And again, this might get a bad rap here, but if those 10 classes is the complete game, then sure, I encourage you to make those 10 classes. But in reality, most of the time, you probably only need those 5 playable classes or whatever it might be, 5 spells or 10 spells or whatever. Just replace classes. Classes is essentially a variable here, like for an MMO experience, for example. Do you really need the 10 to make the game complete? If you want to ship that complete game, is it not, technically complete with the 5, and then, you've got your other 5 ideas already fleshed out, and that can be DLC, and I encourage you to make the DLC free. So it's going to keep players coming back. And questions like, what does the alpha version look like? Let's iterate on that feedback, and then we can add that to the beta. Quote here: constraint creates clarity. Think about that for a minute. Makes sense. Think in deliverables. So in the industry, there's this thing called sprints. They're 2 weeks long. In 2 weeks from now, let's have a playable combat prototype. No, don't worry about the spells yet. Just the basic left mouse button attack. Don't even worry about the death animations yet. Let's just get something working. So, this is a realistic feature to give yourself, or to give your team if you're trying to be a project leader, or yourself if you're a solo indie dev or you're working on a small team. Here's another example. In 2 weeks from now, we got the core gameplay loop done last week. It's time to start working on that menu page and connecting it to the back end. So let's get the main menu working for the next screen. Maybe like our example in the Skyrim example, let's get that intro scene working. We got the core gameplay loop. Let's start rounding out the world with some of these nice little features here that really round out the story and experience. In 2 weeks from now, let's focus on just polishing the playable characters' animations. Let's make sure that the hack and slash is really clean. Let's make sure that the run transitions to the walk cleanly. It's a big deal for our game. This is the focus of our game. We want to have really clean animation. So let's take the time and do it right. 2 weeks, just focus on just that piece, is a realistic deliverable. Now talking about milestones, we got this idea of alpha version. Let's you want to probably target your versions to, Q3 or whatever. Before GTA 6, for example, gives a solid timeline. Like there's, hey, we're releasing on November 19th. They'll say, hey, we're releasing in Q2 or we're releasing in fall next year. So you kind of want to do the same. Like even if it is a small project, you kind of want to do the same, whether you're a project leader or managing your own game. Let's target the alpha version for end of Q3. We'll ship it out to internal testers. Maybe we got Kickstart backers. We want to ship out our alpha version to. They got access. They kickstarted our project, so they get access to the alpha version even before the public gets access to the beta version. Based on how much feedback we get, let's set a soft target for Q2 of next year. But that could very well be pushed to Q3 or Q4 next year, depending on how much feedback we get. And then, that's the target for the beta, and we'll ship out to our Steam wishlisters. And from there, we'll do another iteration. Maybe we'll target Q1 of next year for the full production release. Execution language builds real progress. So if you start thinking in these small deliverable chunks, you're going to see much more progress. However small, your progress will be achieved, and your progress will be maintainable, and will also reduce your burnout. Respecting the cost of implementation. So if you are a developer yourself, obviously you know how much hard work goes into it, but this slide is more for the idea guys. So development is really hard work, and sorry if this is hurting your ego, idea guys, but the idea is quite literally like at least like it's 1%. Like I'm going to be honest with you, I'm being charitable here on this slide. I'm saying 95%. The development work is like quite literally 99% of the work. And the game design and stuff, it's especially for simple games like 2D games or mobile games, like the game design and stuff, you can make up these games lightning fast, and even design them really well lightning fast. And let's be real, there's a development cost, there's a testing cost, there's a maintenance cost, which all transcribes into the scope cost of the actual overall product. So before considering a feature, ask yourself, is this something that our core user actually wants? What does the market research say about having this feature in the game? And, is adding this new feature worth delaying the shipping timeline? Good leaders will protect the team's time, and good indie developers, and again, this is to the indie developers who are working small teams or solo developers, you got to protect your own time. So, if you want to ship out something at the end of the year, you have to ask yourself these questions. Is there market research to indicate that having this feature is going to improve the marketability of our game? Is this feature really worth delaying the shipping timeline? Can it be delivered as a DLC? Again, I'm not saying ship unfinished, half-finished games and then sell the rest later down the road as DLC. I'm encouraging you to, think about what is a complete game, making that and shipping it. And here, replacing ego with feedback loops. So super important here. I've touched about it on a few of the other slides. Test early. Ship out those small updates to your internal testing group. Getting feedback early ultimately saves time in the long run. You do not want to develop this entire combat system if the players don't even like, the simplest left mouse button action. So get that feedback early. You shouldn't be afraid to ship stuff out to your internal testing group early and iterate on that feedback. You got to listen to your players. I've done this a lot with the games I've developed. It's so easy to become blind to your game. So, you've played it at so many different levels during the construction that you don't even begin to understand what's bad or what's good. When I shipped out my first game, Animal Dash, it took me a while to build, and it was such a laborious development process because it was my first game that I was shipping out that, let's be honest, for 80% of the development process, it was complete crap. And so when I finally got it to a playable spot, I was really proud with it, and I shipped it out to the players, and every single player essentially was, complaining about the physics and the gravity of the game, and I had to reiterate on all of that because I thought it was incredible. But when my players told me it wasn't, we went ahead and fixed that for the production release, and it ended up serving the game a lot better, and I ended up realizing that I did indeed like it more myself as well after iterating on that player feedback. What matters most is the new player experience. If you cannot hook that new player, your game's cooked. Just the important point here is that your players are, essentially a free marketing team. If you can build an experience that people will recommend to other gamers, you literally just won the world. you need to adapt here without emotional attachment. It's so easy to become emotionally connected to your ideas, like I was saying before. Like, I like the physics, I like the gravity of my game, but when I shipped out to my internal testers, they're like, bro, you got to fix this. So I went ahead and fixed it. It's important to put your bias aside when you're facing real-world opposition from the market and your testers. Flexibility will always beat stubbornness. Lastly here, building momentum. You got to maintain realistic goals. Whether this is giving goals to your team or giving goals to yourself, you need to reduce your burnout. Burnout is so common in development in the tech world, as well as especially indie development. Small incremental achievements that build on top of each other are the achievements and goals that are going to drive real value, and they're going to reduce your burnout because you'll see that your game and your progress is actually achieving something. You should approach every single new game and every single new feature as a learning experience. Each time you develop a new feature, if you discover a better way to do something, don't be afraid to go back and fix where you did it wrong in the first place. This might seem counterintuitive, but in the long run, you're going to be building momentum by reducing that maintenance cost. And as well, if you need to onboard a new developer, if you've got something working in one fashion on some location, but you have the same architecture that should have been implemented in another spot, but you developed it earlier and it's a whole bunch of spaghetti code, it's going to be hard to explain to onboarding that developer. Or when you set the project aside for 6 months because you went on vacation or something, and then you come back to it, you're going to look at that code and wonder what the hell is going on. So reducing the maintenance costs on yourself, not only yourself, your other developers. Momentum turns ideas into ship features. So what's the general idea here? Anyone can build a game, but few can ship. And I just released a really banger video, and it's been somewhat blowing up in terms of what I consider successful. It's got some pretty good retention, and it's quickly launching into building a 3D platformer. Anyone can do it, but anyone can do it on their own game and maybe share it with their bros. But few will actually end up shipping it. So taking those last 5 bullet points, if you really focus on those, you're gonna start turning your unfinished projects into something that's ready to share with the world, and then you're gonna just need to work on getting it published onto one of the platforms, Google Play, Apple Store, Steam, whatever. Shameless self-promotion again. Watch my other video series for inspiration. Now, this might seem counterintuitive because I just, basically did a takedown of idea guys. I don't want you to stop dreaming. I just want to be clear. The world does, in fact, need dreamers, but the dreams are for the bed. When you wake up, you need to transform those dreams into actionable, deliverable, and realistic chunks of work. And again, here specifically for the indie devs who work on small teams or solo projects, you got to wear those multiple hats. Don't just develop the game. You have to manage it, you have to test it, you have to market, and then ship it. Thanks for watching. There's no way anyone made it all the way to the end. So if you did, hit like, hit subscribe, follow for more. Thanks.